This conference will now be recorded.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Karen Moe. I'm Emeritus at NASA, and I am co-chairing the ESIP Disasters Lifecycle Cluster. So I want to welcome everybody here today when we have our discussion on trusted federal data sources for hazard response and decision making.
Karen, can I interrupt quickly? We are seeing a blank white screen.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. Perfect.
Yes, I see what happened. Yes, so welcome to our webinar. We have been looking within the disaster lifecycle cluster. We've been looking at what it means to have trusted data for the people who are in various stages of emergency response, preparedness, during events, after events, even through the risk cycles. And so in determining what trusted data means and how to identify it, how to make it easily accessible to people in the field when they need it. We've been working closely with a number of different groups to address trusted data concepts. And our purpose today is to take a look at the U.S. Federal resources that are available for emergency managers and disaster response. So we're going to be hearing from NASA, NOAA, and FEMA. Unfortunately, our guest speaker from USGS was not able to make it today after all. We will be, this session is being recorded because we will have a follow-up discussion at the East Summer Meeting, July 19th, where we'll be discussing some of the concerns and issues that people at the user end of this data might be facing in trying to access data products to respond to disasters and events. So with that introduction, we have asked each of the speakers to address their current GIS service offerings and ways that they're discovered and accessed, some insights into plans going forward, and contact information for people to follow up and get more information from these agencies about their products. And then we'll be using this information to then look at ways to support the end users in actually accessing these various resources. So with that brief introduction, I will say if you have any comments, we only have 3 presentations today instead of the 4, but you can put your comments in the chat box, and I'll be monitoring that. And I think we'll see if we can have a little bit of time for question and answer. So with that introduction, let me go ahead and invite Maggie Glasgow and her team to discuss NASA Disasters Program products, and Jeremy Kirkendall will be making that presentation. So I believe that Jeremy.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah. So my name is Maggie Glasgow. I'm a disaster coordinator for the Applied Sciences Earth Science Disasters Program. And joining me today also is our GIS team, who helps to run our disasters mapping portal, and Jeremy will be giving you a live demo of the portal. And so NASA does response and is going to be adding a risk and resilience part to our program. But this will give you a highlight of some of the responses that we've done and some of the other products that are available. So I'll turn it right over to Jeremy. Take it over.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, so this is just the main program website, disasters.nasa.gov. If you click the button down here, you would go to the disasters mapping portal, and this is the homepage of the mapping portal. So we have an ESRI portal with a custom homepage. We've got our featured maps and apps up here. These are usually going to be story maps for our recent or our largest responses that we want to highlight. We've got an app right here that is showing a lot of our real-time products, and on a different tab, if I just bring it up full screen, we have a dashboard that we recently launched that shows all of the program's responses everywhere, based with the type, with the tier, which is the level of effort that we're putting in for the responses. So like the major hurricanes and wildfires would be a tier 2. We break it down by month, so you can see, you know, when we tend to peak with more responses. We've got an active response right now in the central US with all the flooding going on. So this is a neat way to see where the program has been involved. Obviously, a lot of disasters in the US that we focus on, and you can get an idea of where else we tend to contribute. Not so much in Africa, but a lot more in Southeast Asia. If we go back to the homepage, we've got all the different disaster types here, and then on the right side, we break it down chronologically. So if you wanted to see what our tropical cyclones would look like, this is one area we're about to make a very large improvement. So if you were to click this, if you're familiar with the Esri portals, you would see this is just a bunch of groups that are being listed. But we've taken the Esri Enterprise Sites tool, and we have built some much better user interfaces. So this is one of the new pages that'll be launching within the next week or so. This is just dedicated to the tropical cyclones. We've got that same dashboard so you can see where the cyclones tend to be concentrated. But lower down, we break it down with the story maps that were created, the individual product galleries, and then an example of one of the flood products for that type of disaster. So if we wanted to go look at what some of these story maps are like, what we're doing is we're taking all of these different products that NASA's created for these events, and we're trying to give a narrative as to what the product is, how to use it, ways that it can be combined with other data sets that might be useful. So this is when Hurricane Florence was hitting the East Coast. We've got a product here that is showing where known water, flood water, and wetlands would be. We have a number of other products. This was a big one where we teamed up with FEMA. This is our UAVSAR instrument was flown on an aircraft, and we made all of these different passes monitoring flooding on some of the major rivers after the hurricane had hit. We have products that'll help show power outages at night caused by some of these events. So you can see once it's loaded, make sure, there we go. Before and after, you can see a lot of power was lost more on the west side of the city there. So this can be kind of neat, especially in third world countries where there's a lot less of a utility infrastructure for monitoring this kind of stuff. We'll produce multiple types of flood maps. Why have multiple of the same kind of product? Because they're all produced in different ways. And if multiple products say there's flooding in an area, then it's more likely that flooding actually exists in that area. We can also produce damage maps. So these are change detection that will determine where there is likely damage that has been caused, whether it be from a wildfire or from high winds from a hurricane. So this shopping center likely saw a lot of damage, a few other small areas. We have some imagery that can be contributed, but it's not the highest resolution, so it's not always as great of a product compared to some of our other ones that we can contribute. If we go back to this page, we have the product galleries, which are going to contain the individual products themselves. So if you want to use these with your own data that you're creating, you can go into the product gallery and say you want to grab that damage proxy map and you want to compare it to maybe a layer of bridges or some other critical infrastructure, a water treatment plant or something. You can grab that map and you can bring it into a web map with your own layers, and then you can start comparing it to infrastructure that you know about. And there we go. Took a second to load. So an emergency response official for this city could bring in their own data and try to get an idea of what may have been impacted the most by the storm. So that's what we try to do, is create narratives about the data to help people understand it, but also make it very available so that all they have to do is go into the product gallery, grab the layer that they want, and there's a URL over here. That's an Esri REST endpoint. So you just copy that and you can bring it right into your own portal or use it in ArcGIS Online. One thing to get our data out there more that we're doing is we have NASA itself has an ArcGIS Online presence, and we have established a collaboration. So anything that's getting shared into our collaboration group automatically gets fed right up into the equivalent ArcGIS Online group. So if you were to go into ArcGIS Online and search for NASA damage proxy map, it's going to show the results. So right now we're only searching in just that one, but we can change it and search in the entire ArcGIS Online. And there's some other people that have created those products, but you can see these are some that we've created that was published by an Esri person, but our products are showing up in the general ArcGIS Online searches. So that really increases their exposure, because otherwise the only other way to get our products had been to go to our specific portal. So adding that collaboration's a pretty big deal. Does anyone have any questions so far on any of the products or anything I've shown off? All right.
Jeremy?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Dave Jones with StormCenter and Geo Collaborate. I just had a quick question about the timeliness of the data, like the power outage stuff and the damage assessment or change detection. Is that available pretty quickly, or does it take a matter of days or weeks to get that data and make it available?
It really depends on the product, the severity of the event, the availability of the scientists. So you know that if the satellite hasn't passed over the area yet, obviously we can't capture the data. Some of these satellites go 8 days between passing over somewhere. We have a multiple number of satellites that can create different products. So like when we're using ESA's Copernicus to access their Sentinel-1 data, we've got 1A and 1B. So that helps cut down on some of the issues. We've got Sentinel-2 data that we're also accessing to process some things. We'll use MODIS, even though it's going to be a lower resolution. So depending on what we're trying to produce, we may be able to produce a product very quickly that isn't quite as good, and then a little bit later, we follow up with a high-resolution Sentinel pass. That's what happened in this story map. We had optical data on the 28th, and then a SAR pass happened on the 4th. So you can see the resolution of the optical data on the left from MODIS isn't that great. It's a 250-meter resolution, and then we've got the really high-res SAR data that happened a few days later. So once it's been captured, it'll take a little while for the data to be downloaded, processed depending on who it's going through, and then it also takes a little time to get to us and get published. We've had things published within a day of the data being captured. Other times it can take 2 or 3 days. Some products like, so we have a section of products that are near real-time products. They will update pretty frequently. One of the products, a SMAP-based soil moisture product, is a 3-day composite, so that one's only going to update every 3 days. Other ones, like we have a global landslide nowcast. That one is going to update every 3 hours. And then we've also got another soil moisture product that updates daily. So it really comes down to what the product is that you're looking at. And when we are creating, so the near real-time products are just updating all the time. This one is, most of them are global. This soil moisture product is only for the continental US, but these are always there. We don't have to be actively responding to an event, they'll be there. When we produce specific products, can someone get their phone?
Karen, you can mute that person. Yes, there we go. Great.
All right. So when we produce the products that are just one-off in response to an event, those can have a little more urgency if it's a more severe event. When we were responding to the California wildfires, we were acting pretty quickly with that one. That's where stuff was getting out within the day of it being captured. We made quite a few damage proxy maps for that one.
That sounds great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Jeremy,
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Karen. Just a quick thought that, as I mentioned, we're looking at the usability criteria from the end user's point of view, and it does seem that that latency would be a criteria that would change for the different types of use. And I'm wondering if that's something in terms of flagging that data, and if there's a way of indicating that latency topic for end users.
Yeah, so what we try to do is in the item details of a page for a product, we would explain what the product is, and if we know that there's another pass coming, that one isn't formatted well. Let me grab a different one. If we know the next time a satellite pass is coming, we would try to list the date of when it's expected, but there's always those issues of if it's optical data, is it a high enough quality that we'll be able to make a product from it? We run into issues where maybe it's a weekend and a scientist isn't working over the weekend because we're not a response agency, we're just a best effort. There's also other concerns, like if we're using the ESA satellites, even though they're passing over, they're not always capturing data. So we can't guarantee that data is captured, that it's good. Listing the latency and trying to explain it is something that we'll be able to do to an extent when we're in the middle of creating a product guide that is going to list all the types of products that our program can create, and then we can explain the latency in that guide. But yeah, ours is just inconsistent. So aside from the near real-time products, we really can't give them too specific of an answer.
Understandable. Jeremy, there's a question here. How do local state agencies reach out to NASA during a federal declared disaster? How do people reach out?
Yeah, so a lot of the federal agencies, we already have established contacts. We frequently work with FEMA and the National Guard. The flooding in the U.S. that's been happening this year, we've worked a lot with the USDA. We always have a contact us section on the website if someone had no idea how to get a hold of us, and then they could submit here and it would come through to the headquarters team for the disasters program. We have a number of other partners at the state level that we will reach out with, and they know to reach out to us as well if they have a need. We've worked with a few international organizations, the IFRC. So we're still our portal's only been around for like a year and a half or so, or coming up on 2 years. So we're still relatively new in trying to make those partnerships, and we're always looking for new people that can use this data. If you guys know anyone that needs this kind of data, please let them know about the portal. You can give them Maggie's email address, my email address, and we're just trying to network, because we'll go to conferences and hand out cards, do outreach that way and whatnot, but there's not an easy way to reach all of the really local contacts for some of these places.
That's good. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think thank you, Jeremy and Maggie. I think we'll go ahead on to our second speaker, and Kari Sheet.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and so Curie is the Integrated Dissemination Program Manager for GIS systems at NOAA's National Weather Service. And I am going to make Kari presenter. And I can see that it looks good.
Yes, I've got to get the right screen up now. That's not what you wanted. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see the first slide now?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Karen said, I lead the GIS team for our dissemination program at the NOAA National Weather Service. Our office as a whole disseminates most information. We partner with another part of the Weather Service who runs the actual IT infrastructure, and I'll talk a little bit about that near the end of the presentation. They help us with 24/7 monitoring, and they have a staff of dedicated system admins for those purposes. What I did for this presentation is pretty much kind of talk about some data that we get asked about frequently, as well as just kind of an overview of our GIS enterprise, and then the data questions that Dave asked about in the email invitation for this meeting. So the Weather Services Dissemination Enterprise GIS is made up of currently 2 programs, and we're going to be adding 2 more within the next 12 months. So one will come on by the end of the year, and the other will come on probably September of next year. So those things that we have right now are our back-end data services. The Weather Services manages one set of services that are generated using ARC servers, so you get the REST endpoint as well as the WMS get capabilities files for those services. Then we partner with the National Ocean Service, which is another part of NOAA for NowCoast, and that is both a back-end service provider as well as a front-end interactive map. So that's what you see on the right side of this slide. And then we do have a Weather Service GIS portal. It's a combination of, right now, the API from the Esri portal using a dashboard, and then it also gives links to places where you can find either services or downloadable data. What we're working on, and I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, is GeoServer Stack. That's how we're going to get the individual radar data from all of the Weather Service radars around the country available. And then we are also working on an enterprise map viewer that will be available. It should go live next September, so September of 2020. We'll probably have a kind of experimental version for people to look at and comment on after the first of the year, but it won't be fully operational until September. So that's what I was talking about, that's in the works. Basically, if you've used anything, one of the most common questions I get when I go to conferences are, where should I be getting your data? It seems like it's 1,000 different places. And that is true. Even within the Weather Service, we have approximately 30 different map-based web pages. So this enterprise viewer, the goal is to bring all, or as much of the functionality as we can within security limitations into one map viewer. And so some of you have used the enhanced data display model, which was a prototype project in the Weather Service, probably, gosh, about 5 years ago now. Some of the forecast offices just do briefings in PowerPoint, and then we have things like the hazards viewer that's out in the western part of the country. There's also a snow viewer out of Vermont. When I say 30 different web pages, I mean 30 different web pages. So if you've seen things with the Weather Service logo on it and it looks different depending on if you're looking at a hurricane or if you're looking at a snowstorm, our goal is to get it all into one similar look and feel. So no matter what kind of weather you're looking at or where you are in the country, you'll have the same experience with our maps. Weather Service, so IDP is the acronym for the Integrated Dissemination Program. And so that I mentioned that we have services available currently there, as well as the just website portal, and then the Ocean Services Now Coast. So a question, a lot of people have used both sets of data, and so a question we get a lot of times is, what should we be using? So when you're looking for Weather Service data, you should be going to the Weather Service ARC Server Services first, and Now Coast for anything we don't quite have available as services. Now Coast has existed about a decade longer than IDP, so they just have they've had time to develop more things, and we're working on removing some of that discrepancy. The data should be the same, but we're working on ways to have less duplication of efforts through those things, because the picture you see here is the data farm, so both applications live in that, so it's not good from our side if we're using up resources to serve the same data multiple times, because every application is actually on, like this picture here is our College Park server rack. So they exist there, and they also exist in Boulder. So we don't really need that data to be 4 different places. 2 different systems is sufficient. And it's all monitored as this 17 by 24 by 365. So the what is where? So out of the IDP services, we have services that are focused on delivering weather service data. It's a very data-centric focus. So when you get data from IDP, it's going to be in the same color scheme that we use for weather service. So if weather service has, like, for example, the NDFG services, they have a very specific color ramp for all of their different elements. So that color ramp is going to be what we provide through the services. We're working on getting that viewer developed. So like I said, we're about a year away from that. And then Now Coast, it really started out as a front-end viewer, and then as they needed to develop data to put into the viewer, they exposed it for you to be able to use in your systems. It began, like it says here, in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001 when the first one came up. So those of you that are familiar with Esri, it was definitely an ArcIMS application before it became what you see today. Originally, it focused on the marine and community, and you can still get a viewer that's very specific to marine concerns. But what they found was that enough of the land influences the water that it was silly to just trim it to the coast when they had the availability for the data across the land as well. But why are we going to do 2 viewers? As many of you probably know, that if you're in a larger agency that has, we call them line offices, but has sub-organizations within it, each of us have our own mission, and it's enough different that it warrants having separate viewers, because to have one viewer for all of NOAA is just too much in one interface. Even as it is with the weather service, the one that we're developing, we're going to have a separate URL for each of our service areas, and you'll still be able to get at any data in those viewers, but the preset layers will be specific to, say, fire weather or tropical weather. So here are the services that we have available. This is as of January 2019, because that was the last time we did an update. Actually, I'll talk a little bit on this in a minute. Just an hour ago, we went operational with some new services. So even 2 hours ago, when I was making the final revisions to the slides, I wasn't sure that that data was going to be available, so I left it on the what's coming. So you get it hot off the press today. So I won't read it all off, but basically this is in here for a reference slide for you guys. If you wanted to go back and say, okay, where should I be going to get what? So all of these here are what the Weather Service manages. The ones on the right side come from other parts of NOAA. The left side are the Weather Service data. And then this slide tells you what comes from NALCOAST. So these are the ones that I mentioned because NALCOAST has been around longer. They have a few more data sets available than we do. And this is a list of those things. So in this case, NALCOAST, I believe, is the only source, unless there's a private company out there also making it available, but it's the only NOAA source for GIS services for the items listed on this slide. And some of it, like you can see, makes a lot of sense, like the marine near real-time in situ observations, because Ocean Service is concerned about the ocean. They definitely want to make sure that those marine observations are available. There's going to be a change coming to that second one, recent satellite imagery for NESDIS, because NESDIS, which is the satellite branch of NOAA, changed how they're providing the data, and those will be available on July 1st. And then these are just some additional data sources for ways to find more data. So pretty much that geospatial portal, you'll get a link to all of the things I've talked about as IDP providing the web services, but there's also some of like our areas of responsibility for our forecast offices. That's a downloadable shapefile available from that website. We have some other Weather Service specific, more political boundary type of files that are available there. For any NOAA data you're looking for, so this would be things outside of Weather Service. I know that being buried in NOAA, it's very clear to me what comes from weather and what comes from ocean, but it's probably not very clear to anyone else because it's a very fine line. So if you were just looking for NOAA data, the NOAA Geo Platform is the best place to go. And so that's the example on here is actually looking for hurricane data through the NOAA portal. Then the next one is the National Data Buoy Center. They are part of Weather Service. They have a really nice interactive map on their webpage where you can click on the buoy, find out about the weather at the buoy, and then even click and get a picture of the buoy. Or you can look back, I think it's like a week's worth of data. You can step back through to see what the seas have looked like in that area. Or seas is a general term there because some of them are in oceans, but kind of just to say what the water's been doing around the buoy. The National Water Center is a cooperative office that the Weather Service manages, but we also have partners from USGS and Army Corps located there. It's in Tuscaloosa on the campus of the University of Alabama. So stream gauges, inland flooding, the National Water Model is one of our newer products and very popular for people. The WAWA shapefiles, that's the watches and warnings. That's also available from the first link here, the geospatial portal, but we get a question about that data a lot, so we went ahead and included the link on here. And then NOS, Ocean Service, has the Environmental Response Management application. It's a good source if you want to just be able to display data from all of NOAA. That's a good place to go. And then the Prototype Project, which is the enhanced data display. And I had a screenshot of that earlier. So that's kind of the best of the best for where to get specifically Weather Service data, but really most of those have other NOAA data as well. So our plan, these for actually the first four on this slide are what went live today. So that's the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service. That's our water program. so it's river stages. We've added the 24 and 168 hours. Additional quantitative precipitation forecast, or what you would hear Weather Service refer to as QPF. Fire weather, we've really been trying to pay more attention to making that data available through as GIS data. Weather Service is focused on fire weather for a very long time. Snow and ice accumulation, that was because this will be our last update before the winter. We wanted to go ahead and get that in. I mentioned the reference maps earlier that can be downloaded as shapefiles. We now have them available as web services as well. I think the air quality may be waiting for our next update. So that would be later on in the year, just after the first of the year. And then 2020 beyond. So these are the things that we're working on. This actual first one, the individual radars of services, that's more like fiscal year 20. It should be up in October or no later than December, but we'll have something out there for people to look at definitely in the first quarter of FY20. And then you can see other things, more fire data, heat index products, especially things that, since we're talking about disasters here, things that if you've got crews out doing recovery work, you would want this kind of information to be able to not only help you with what your recovery work you're doing, but also to keep your staff safe as they're moving forward. The fire burn scars is down on there. What that is where we've had wildfires, and then that causes the soil to lose its ability to absorb rain. So then we end up with flash flood events in the areas where the fire burn scars are. And then if another question I get often is, okay, if I'm working an incident at 2 a.m., do I call you? Well, you can try to, but I'm probably not going to be the person that can fix your problem immediately. So we have what's called a senior duty meteorologist. That is staffed around the clock, and they're our tier 1 support. So if they can't find it, they're going to talk to our infrastructure and our data flow people to make sure that that's not where the issue is. And then if none of that they can't fix it through that, then they'll contact us as tier 3. So we will be contacted within 2 hours of something being reported to the SDM. If someone else isn't able to fix it, we have 2 hours to respond and 8 hours to fix something. So it's on a FEMA high system if you are familiar with that, which basically means we can have 8 hours of downtime the entire calendar year. Then there's some links on here for notifications from Weather Service, listservs at any time we're planning to do updates or releases, like the release that happened this morning. As soon as it went live, we sent out an email through our IDC GIS listserv to say the new data is available. The NOAA data on that earlier slide is only supported 8x5. So there would be information in the metadata on how to contact the data providers for information on that data. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
That's great, Kari. Are there any questions for Kari? I do have one question here. Are the red flag warnings and watches for fires that you create the authoritative data for states like California?
It would be it's a good question. It gets a little interesting when you go between federal and state. So as far as a red flag warning for fire weather from a federal perspective, yes, but I don't know who has the more authority in that case, if it's the state of California or if it's the Weather Service. But I do know that we are working in tandem with the local and state people that are fighting fires. We're providing them information, as well as like if it was in a national park or somewhere protected by the National Forest Service. We're all working together. So it should be, at least from a federal perspective. But I would hope you don't see much discrepancy between the federal and the state. I know they have a great partnership, especially in California.
Very good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that you have a lot of links in your slides, and I'll make some efforts to make them available to people when we have the recorded video available as well. So maybe we can, was there a question or a comment? All right, well, thank you very much. Kari, we'll move on to our final presentation with Chris Vaughn. And, well, he's getting hooked up there. Chris is the FEMA Geospatial Information Officer, and he champions and coordinates geospatial technologies across multiple resources and recovery programs. I know he's been instrumental in the geospatial geoplatform.gov that we're going to hear about now. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chris.
Thanks very much. Just a audio check. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
Yes, on both counts.
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Always a great opportunity to kind of share the latest and greatest of where we're at. It's a really, really small world, those speakers that you just had speak, you know, to include Marie Pepler. So I'm probably going to quote Marie first. She can't be here today, but we'll invoke a Marie Peplerism here, right? So she always gets up by saying the right information at the right time to the right person. And that's kind of what she's really trying to guide. And I would assume that my other colleagues on the speakers would violently agree with that sentiment. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the Disasters Geo Platform initiative that we have underway. And as I get into that, I'll probably reference a little bit of Jeremy's presentation and Kari's presentation, because I think they're both, you know, from an agency perspective, both NASA and NOAA, they're just crushing it. So a little bit about this. So disasters.geoplatform.gov, right? So FEMA is in this really unique position, right? FEMA is actually a coordinating agency. We don't have a lot of staff, and our real main role is actually to help coordinate both information and resources during a significant event. And we, the FEMA GIS team, find ourselves kind of in this middle ground. We're trying to produce information. We produce a number of impact estimates. We try to provide information in relation to, let's say, transaction-based information, you know, where our resources are, where the teams are, where we're sending water bottles, so where we're putting resources, whether it's a place or a thing, a people or a thing, out in the field, but also all that hazard modeling that still goes. So there's a FEMA-produced information node, and then this coordination node kicks in where we're receiving an amazing amount of information from the breadth of the whole community, whether that's private sector, interagency partners, you know, obviously NASA and NOAA that presented here, USGS that was the one to present. And so we're kind of in this unique position of feeling a responsibility to promulgate this information. And over the decades, I would say that we've been at this for decades now, we've come to the realization that we really need to do something as a collaborative. So FEMA is sponsoring, we're in partnership, but we're also sponsoring the stand-up of this initiative called disasters.geoplatform.gov. It is not a FEMA-owned system. It's run and managed by the Department of Interior's geoplatform.gov, which is part of the FGDC. But we, FEMA, are there kind of as a curator, instigator, inhibitor of this concept. And really what it is to get us away from where we were in the past. And I'm sorry, let me see if I can get this. Oh, that didn't work. I'm trying to get this mess out of here. Oh. Well, you just have to believe it. Geospatial problems of the past, right? That's what that title says, right? So traditionally speaking, we'll hold a number of coordination calls during an activation, generally at the 2 p.m. Eastern time during large-scale events. And that's a chance for the states, locals, counties, federal interagency partners to kind of share their latest and greatest of what they're doing. We also spend quite a bit of time curating all those information nodes, and typically that is put out, or has traditionally been put out, as a PDF, an Adobe PDF. Those of you that have been in this community for a while may have been on the Glenn Bethel email. He's a legend in our community. He's been putting out information related to disasters for at least 20 years. And it was kind of like this one guy, he just kind of took it on himself to try to put out information for the good of the order. And so we kind of inherited that from him. We continue to do that, but we recognize that there's a better way. And that's what we're trying to work on with this initiative called Disasters. So if I can now go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a real quick overview of what it is. Once again, it's under the geoplatform.gov. It's essentially a community under geoplatform.gov. But inside of there, you will find a litany of information: flood extent, damage assessments, story maps. So basically curated event data, applications, working groups, contact lists, resources, training materials. That's all the stuff that we're trying to publish to this environment. The entire goal is to come up with unified search. That is our top tier goal for the disasters community, is that when you go into any one of these incidents, the wildfire that Jeremy spoke of earlier, or some of the flooding incidents that Kari may have spoke of, you would go to that top level bar. That's the dream, is you go to the top level bar and say flooding or Nebraska flooding. And immediately a litany of information comes back to you related to that specific incident, whether that's pulled from data.gov, from story maps, or from our own coordination calls. All of that is underway. And I do want to just pause for a minute and recognize what Jeremy just said in his presentation. Jeremy, for those that know, I'm going to reiterate it. And for those that don't know, I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek under the curtain here. There's a large geospatial conference coming up. The Esri Users Conference, International Users Conference, is coming up in about 2.5 weeks. And generally speaking, this is not an endorsement of Esri. I'm a government worker. I don't endorse a specific product. We do have a partnership with Esri as well as other technologies. But generally speaking, what Jeremy spoke of is kind of what I've seen happen across the community. So about 5 or 6, 7 years ago, Esri released this thing called RTS Online, and a number of agencies rolled out AGOL accounts, FEMA included. Part of what Jeremy just displayed for you today was an on-prem deployment of that, but he talked about tying his on-prem deployment with his enterprise deployment with AGOL, RTS Online, NASA, RTS Online. That's called collaboration. And then he also spoke about something called sites. So Esri's got this product line that they're rolling out called Sites and Hub, and it's kind of an evolution of their open data pages. And it's all in the name of collaboration and federation, right? So I think my assumption is that you're going to see a lot more of that in the very near future. That is definitely some of the stuff that we're evaluating from a FEMA perspective. But it's all in the name of trying to integrate and share information, which is the whole point of today's discussion. So I just wanted to commend Jeremy and Kari for how they're sharing their information out in an open public manner. So I guess just to wrap up kind of where I'm at here, we think that the key to success, the key to integration, is proper tagging. We have some ontology that we are using called the Modeling and Data Inventory. It's a series of tags. That way, no matter where the information is coming from, who's providing the information, what incident it's by, there's a schema that we're going to try to apply to that so it's indexable and queryable. Once again, the entire point of disasters at geoplatform.gov is that top level search bar for federated search. That is our entire intent for building this site out. Here's some slick back-end architecture for you. A lot of it's riding off of cloud-based solutions, but I can't overemphasize the entire point is the indexing and searching through a disaster's ontology. Last slide here. That's the main contact email or webpage there, communities.jplatform.gov, disasters, contact us. Each one of those links you to basically a listserv. So you can sign up. There's a couple of listservs that you can find out more about. We host a once-a-month meeting called the Modeling and Data Working Group. That reports to our Emergency Support Function Leaders Group, which is under the response perspective from FEMA. And so right now, a lot of the effort is focused on what's known as community lifelines. For those that have to deal with lifelines, your emergency manager should by now have been aware or made aware of the lifeline effort. So the Modeling Data Working Group is focused on a lifeline per month. I think the next meeting that we're having is going to be on a food, water, and sheltering lifeline. That's coming up in just a few weeks. And then I would also encourage this group to sign up to both of to the top three lists for sure. That's basically the next generation of the Glenn Bethel email. If you sign up to that, you'll get this curated list of all the available data sources that we're tracking or aware of during a disaster. And then you can sign up to both our geospatial and remote sensing coordination calls and get details on how to join those calls during an incident. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it back over to Ali Desmias.
That's great. Do we have any questions or comments for Chris? Well, Chris, one thing that caught my attention is the ontology you're developing for emergency management. And we have identified within our cluster activity in ESIP a real need for using terminology in a consistent way that has a clear meaning, for our end user. And we were considering looking at ways of extracting that kind of terminology directly from user documentation. And it's the kind of thing that if we look at the example that NOAA has provided over decades of working with the public, that people begin to get familiar with, the meaning of certain terms. And we understand that, there are some areas where terminology can make things confusing. So we want to try to avoid those pitfalls. So I'd be interested in following up with you to give a little more information about that effort.
Absolutely. I would be very happy to discuss with you.
I'll also note that you've got a number of links that you've provided on the on your slides, and so I'll be working with Megan to make some effort to get the slides out to people so that everyone could have the links that you've been hearing about today.
Hey, Karen?
Yes.
This is Dave Jones. It looks like there's a question in the chat, and it looks like it's for Chris, so I'll just say it. Does the FEMA Geo Portal get incident imagery from USGS, HDDS, NASA, and DHS portals too? How is the effort to be able to find available imagery being coordinated?
Great question, and you brought up a question that I actually didn't talk about, which is the FEMA Geo Platform. So kind of in this overarching strategy that we're calling the Disasters Initiative, there's going to be a FEMA presence. Right now we have a FEMA ArcGIS online account. It's kind of our main principal way to share FEMA provided apps, data, services, those kinds of things. So damage assessments would be a good example of what FEMA would provide. So let's go back to, say, Hurricane Maria. FEMA contracted out aerial imagery with a private sector vendor, quantum spatial in this manner, and flew the territory of Puerto Rico. We hosted that out as a flag web mapping service. So that link and that information would have been available through the FEMA Geo Platform, as well as our corresponding damage assessments. We looked at 1.4 million structures and gave a qualitative assessment on each structure. And those damage assessments are publicly available and made through the FEMA Geo Platform. Going back to like this interagency perspective, the disasters initiative, on this website, we do have an imagery indexing that's being supported through this Glenn Bethel email concept that I talked of. And so it's querying HCDS, it's querying Eagle Vision, it's querying Sentinel and Landsat, and it's showing you where the latest footprints are for that imagery. We wouldn't necessarily rehost the imagery, but we would definitely be able to point you back to say, hey, Landsat collected over this area, or Digital Globe collected over it, or Spot, or whoever else is that we have access. We're able to do that now thanks to a partnership with NGA. They're using a vendor called Voyager to do that imagery indexing for us, but that is also made available through the disasters initiative.
Great. That sounds terrific. Hey, Chris, I had a question on my own. This is Dave Jones with StormCenter and Geo Collaborate. I was just wondering how we do a lot of work with the All Hazards Consortium, and we're putting together quite a bit of response information for the movement of utility vehicles across the country. So they can really get across state borders and into areas to restore power very quickly. Is there a single source location to find out where aerial imagery for damage assessments are done? We're able to get the imagery from NOAA's King Air aircraft when FEMA tasks them to fly over areas like Hurricane Michael. But are there other sources out there that could be used like a day or two after to help the utilities understand the magnitude of the response that they need to put together?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm going to answer that in two ways. One, FEMA provides damage assessments, geospatial damage assessments in particular. Actually, I mean, even go even further than that, right? So there's probably 5 or 6, 7 different components inside of FEMA that produces and provides damage assessments. From our team's perspective, we produce geospatial damage assessments to show the size, scope, and extent of an incident. Generally speaking, our damage assessments for a hurricane, for a noticed event, we try to get them out. We try to do predictive impact estimates. So generally speaking, 24 hours, maybe as lucky as 48.
You want to just sit behind me and we can listen on speakerphone and watch on my computer for 15 minutes? Oh.
Sorry, somebody's not on mute. Everybody, please mute your phones. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's from a FEMA perspective. 24 hours, 48 hours pre-incident, pre-landfall for a hurricane like a noticed event. And as the event starts to unfold, we tighten that up or refine that. Obviously, once the planes get in the air, we'll take a look at the imagery. NOAA is a good example. And we generally will put eyes on to validate those model damage assessments. And our goal is to produce a single authoritative service for those damage assessments from a geospatial damage assessment perspective. That's from a FEMA perspective, just that FEMA one element of geospatial damage assessment. All right. Going back up to the disasters initiative, there are tons of people that produce damage assessments. And so one of the ideas that we're trying to get off the ground is like, so example, a damage assessment initiative. That way you're starting to pull in ground-based damage assessments from either state, local volunteers. Red Cross does that. They do their PDAs. SBA does theirs. HUD does theirs. And so our goal with these initiatives, and this is still very much in a concept, but it would present to you the best available information at the right time, as best as we know it. But my point to you, Dave, is, maybe follow up with me on the side. I'd love to show you where that is on the disaster website right now, but there's no reason that you wouldn't be able to have access to that. We make it publicly available already. I would actually advocate that you look for the damage assessments over and above an image. I think people kind of get a little bit too wrapped around the actual and the image. We're usually able to do the model damage assessments faster than they're able to get the imagery collected. And that'll give you a faster perspective of impact.
That sounds great, Chris. Thanks very much. Karen?
Okay, well, do we have any other questions for any of our guest presenters today? Well, I want to thank everybody then for participating. I do appreciate the data that's been shared, and we hope to catch up with USGS and provide a segment on the other major federal agency inputs. So we'll be collecting the information, and we'll post charts to Figshare so that there'll be access to these charts with their links embedded later this after the recording then is posted. So let me just say thanks to everybody. And
Karen?
Yes, Dave?
I'm sorry, just a quick point. There was a question in the from one of the attendees if the presentations from the webinar will be sent to participants on the call, or will it be made available? I think we're planning on making those available in the disasters lifecycle cluster part of the ESIP Federation webpage. Is that right?
Yes, we'll put them up, and what I can do, I don't have everybody's email apparently who attended today, but what I can do is send that notice out with access to the charts on the same distribution that the invitation to today's webinar occurred.
That sounds terrific. And thanks, everybody, and thanks to all the speakers. I know this is a tough and busy time, but it's all about making more federal data available for decision making. So we really appreciate your time.
Okay, with that, we'll conclude our webinar. Thank you very much.
This conference will now be recorded.